So during this West Asia war, what is that term that you often get to hear that has now turned into one of the most contentious issues? It is the world's most volatile waterway, and you may have not now all learned about what the Strait of Hormuz actually is all about. Because this is now what we are looking at as far as this very strait, this very narrow passage that holds nearly 20% of the global oil supply. The showdown, however, has increased with President Trump now turning up the heat a notch further with abuse, with threats, with also a ticking deadline. He has now two demands from Iran. Reopen the Strait of Hormuz or else make a peace deal. And if you not, then hell will rain on Iran. Iran now has time till the 8th of April, 6:30 a.m. and this is according to IST, which is the Indian Standard Time, where President of the United States has says that even if Iran has now failed to open the key waterway, well then, hell will bomb on Iran as far as when it comes to the power plants, the bridges, the final hours. However, what we are looking at, this is possible escalation in West area because the clock is ticking. And the next few hours are extremely crucial, which will actually decide when this, where this war is actually heading. Because this is not for the first time that President Trump has now threatened to blow up Iran's power plants, which tens of millions of Iranians depend and rely on power when it comes to schools, hospitals, residences, and other basic aspects of civilian life. Several experts in the United States, however, have warned now what really will happen from here on will actually change the course of history. Well, in the meantime, let's talk about, is this an escalation or a desperation that has now been seen? Because there has been a lot of back and forth and several deadlines that President of the United States has said. So what he has said, let's go back a little bit in time and get you an understanding of what he has been saying with regards to the Strait of Hormuz, because the blockade has been effectively weaponized by Iran. So let's take a look on the 3rd of March. What did President Trump say? That he said that the US Navy will escort the vessels that are stranded at the Strait of Hormuz, giving that kind of assurance. Then later, he made an appeal to the countries whose stranded ships needed help. He said, well, it is your problem, you can deal with it, and the United States will only assist you. However, what did he receive in, when it comes to response? It was rejection, it was a snub from the allies of the United States. And this is what he said on the 17th of March, saying that US doesn't need the Strait of Hormuz, we don't anyways use it much, and it is your problem, deal with it. Then comes the 21st of March. He issues another first deadline, says open the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours or else. Then later, as far as in anticipation that there would be a certain pause or even a ceasefire, there came a breather when 5 days, postponement of the strikes was announced. Then the strikes, as far as this postponement is concerned, it was extended till the 6th of April, which is today. And now what we are looking at, another round of escalation. On the 4th of April, he says, well, time is running out for Iran and hell will break loose. And of course, yesterday when he said that open the Strait of Hormuz, as you saw the kind of expletives that he seems to be using on his Truth social media post. And now what we are getting to know is the deadline. 6:30 a.m. tomorrow morning is when the deadline ends. Now what we are getting to know on part of Iran's response, because it seems to be digging its heels on the Strait of Hormuz, mocking the US president and rejecting the pressure to reopen the critical oil route. A top Iranian official reportedly has described Trump to be an unstable and a delusional figure, even as Tehran has signaled that it will not reopen the strait for a temporary truce. Let's even get in a word from, Rishabh on this. Rishabh, that means it will not reopen a strait for a temporary truce. So that means if there is a certain call for a ceasefire, Iran is not ready to budge.
Well, what we're given to understand that last night, Pakistan Army Chief did dial Washington and Tehran and try to have an immediate ceasefire. In response, what was Tehran saying? Tehran is very clear. We will not open Strait of Hormuz for temporary peace till we have a security guarantee, a long-time peace guarantee. Our ballistic missile programs are not interfered in. Strait of Hormuz remains with us, and we get a payout for the losses that we have incurred in last 38 days. We will not agree to any peace talk. This is something that Iran has communicated. Also, Iran, and this is coming in from the senior sources within Iranian regime, that Iran is very clear that we will not budge into any deadline or pressure that is coming in from Washington. If peace is to be guaranteed, it has to be guaranteed in letter and spirit. And the intent has to be very clear. Not that we have a 45-day truce and after 45 days, when you recoup your military, you again start bombing Tehran. This is something that Iran has put forward in as many words. And that is something that we are looking at. So while we are talking about escalation, we are talking about the deadline from Washington, Iran is not budging in. They are not ready to blink at this point.
Right, because that seems to be the very, point of relevance, because that is what the, Iranians have done. They have turned the Strait of Hormuz into a global chokehold. And now what has been looking like, it has been weaponized to such an extent that multiple countries that are being impacted. And this is where, when it comes to Iran, that wants the world, the global attention or the global focus when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. Because ever since the war has started, Iran has maintained that any hit on its energy network will come at a cost, not just for the US, but for the entire region. And this seems to be the development that is now coming in, because despite, in fact, when it is being said on part of Iranians, even if they reach to a point of any negotiation before President Trump's deadline for hitting the Strait of Hormuz, or even hitting, Iranian regions there, or even hitting their power plants, Iran says, well, the situation for the Strait of Hormuz will not be changed as far as the enemies that it considers, and being US allies as well, it will continue to strike its ships. So that seems to be, as far as Tehran's point of view is concerned. But this very, threat, Rishabh, that has now come in from the President of the United States of America, few hours, the coming hours are going to be extremely, extremely crucial.
Well, definitely. See, we are India time Monday morning. India time Wednesday early morning, 5:30 a.m. is a deadline that Washington has given for opening of Strait of Hormuz. It's been about 13 hours since the deadline has come in. With an exact time for the deadline, there hasn't been any positive response that has come in from Iran. Iran has been actually mocking Donald Trump. If you see the Twitter handles, the X handles of Iranian embassies and consulates worldwide, be it in Zimbabwe, be it here in Hyderabad, be it in European countries or others, they have been, and especially the Thailand, Iranian embassy account from Thailand, yes, they have been.
So Tehran is also blunt, like what President Trump has been issuing his front. No reopening, no backing down, setting up a very high-stakes showdown over one of the world's most critical energy choke points. Rishabh, for the moment, thank you very much for joining in. Let's, in the meantime, get you the focus of what's been happening in Lebanon, because the IDF has been saying that its Air Force has been striking multiple locations in Lebanon where a series of infrastructure, which is associated with Hezbollah, as it says, and weapon caches that have been hidden in the heart of civilian populations across Lebanon have been destroyed on part of the Israeli Air Force. Let me quickly introduce our guest joining us on the broadcast. We have Candice Ardiel, who is the spokesperson of UNIFIL, which is United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon. Candice, thank you very much for taking out your time and speaking us on Times Now. With the President Trump issuing explicit threats, we have seen the kind of profanities that have been used over the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran also warning of further retaliation, and negotiations reportedly are still at square one. Are we witnessing coercive diplomacy at the peak, or there is a dangerous slide towards direct conflict that could easily disrupt the global energy order? Candice.
Thank you. Well, Lebanon has been pulled into this conflict, unfortunately, for the second time in a couple of years. We saw the escalation beginning here on the 2nd of March, and since then it has increased substantially. We've seen Israeli soldiers coming into South Lebanon. We've seen active fighting, including near our Naqoura headquarters. So the situation in Lebanon at the moment is extremely volatile. We've had by most estimates, over 500,000 people from the south who have had to relocate out of their homes, and in other parts of the country as well. Peacekeepers are only present in South Lebanon, and so we're monitoring and observing the situation here. But obviously, all of the rhetoric that we're seeing, not just in the region, but globally, is not helping the situation. We continue to urge all of the actors, all of the parties to Resolution 1701 to get serious and sit down and come up with a negotiated solution and a ceasefire, because there is no military solution to this conflict. We will only see more death, destruction, and harm to civilians, and this is what needs to stop.
So, Candice, when you've been witnessing on ground with Israeli strikes now also hitting areas just 100 meters away from major civilian infrastructures, we've seen hospitals in Beirut. We've seen the kind of conflict that do you believe has now crossed a strategic escalation threshold? Because it is not just when it comes to military command centers of Hezbollah that are being hit, but this is deep in civilian territory.
Yes, the escalation is a great concern. Again, peacekeepers are only present in the south. Our mandate is in the south of Lebanon. We know that there are, of course, airstrikes and things happening in Beirut as well, but our focus is in the south, and we're seeing extreme violence and extreme destruction happening here. Most civilians have had to leave just because of the level of violence and the threats that have been given. The Israel Defense Forces have issued so-called warning orders to push the people to leave their homes in South Lebanon, and many of them have complied out of fear for their lives. We're also seeing demolitions of homes and buildings in certain villages as the Israeli forces advance. And this is something that is obviously extremely problematic. It is something that peacekeepers have urged a stop to, because civilians are always the ones who suffer in the conflict, and civilians on both sides of the blue line in Israel and in Lebanon are suffering now. And again, we reiterate that this needs to stop.
Absolutely, because we don't know exactly when it comes to the coming 24 hours how it's going to look like as far as this conflict is concerned. But Candice, appreciate you joining us here on the broadcast and telling us about when it comes to the conflict that regionally seems to be getting wider. Let's in the meantime talk about another breaking update, what we are getting to know as far as the IRGC is concerned, or the Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran. The intel organization chief Khademi has now been killed. This is according to the intel chief Khademi, who is now being killed. And this information that is now coming across as one by one when it comes to the top leadership, whether it comes to military and civilian, that is now being eliminated on part of Israel and US joint strikes. Now, this is the senior IRGC commander who has been eliminated, as the Revolutionary Guard's intel head is now reported to be dead. The IRGC intel chief Khademi has now been killed. However, we'll see exactly when it comes to who has been claiming responsibility for the killing. But, when it comes to Israel, that has been picking up, especially when it comes to the top leadership, the military command there. Now, IRGC on its part has been announcing the killing of Commander Khademi in the middle of what they have been talking about as far as the current conflict is now concerned. But this follows when it comes to the development that has unfolded in Iran, which IRGC that has been now describing this attack as an act of aggression by foreign forces that is aimed at destabilizing Iran. So, on part of the IRGC, which has been praising the late commander and his services as well, but remains to be seen if they have already announced a replacement for the IRGC intel head. What we are looking at as far as the intel head, Khademi, is concerned, he's now been killed, and this is now been confirmed on part of the IRGC. And this event, however, seems to have, according to the IRGC, cast a shadow over efforts to bring peace to the region. But this seems to be a confirmation of the IRGC intel head, Majid Khademi. Rishabh, you're getting the information. He's been killed in an airstrike.
Well, definitely. See, one after another, the IRGC commanders, IRGC senior officials have been the target of Israel and US. In last 38 days, we have seen the top leadership being targeted and being eliminated as well. But why is Iran still standing strong? That is something that we need to understand. In 2003, when Iraq war happened, and within 3 weeks, Saddam's regime literally collapsed. That's when Iran changed its strategy, and IRGC decided that we will decentralize our forces. All the 31 provinces of Iran now has an autonomous IRGC wing, and they do not need Tehran's clearance to operate. And that's the reason that while the top leadership of IRGC is being eliminated, IRGC continues to operate in the manner that they were operating on day one. And hence, one after another, new leadership is cropping up. Remains to be seen how things unfold, what comes next, and will IRGC be, in a way decimated the way Israel and US wants. As of now, that doesn't look like a possibility, given that, yes, there have been senior IRGC officials being killed, senior commanders, generals of IRGC being killed. But
so
the
according
central
to
leadership
Iranian news reports, it is being said that the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps intel organization, Major General Majid Khadimi was killed in a US-Israeli strike. And the statement says that Khadimi apparently played a major role in Iran's intelligence and security apparatus for nearly 5 decades. However, this seems to be another big development on part of joint strikes that US and Israel have done when it comes to elimination of the military command as far as the IRGC is concerned. Rishabh continues to be with us. Let's talk about as far as the Indian angle here seems to be involved, because we are now looking at yet another LPG tanker, which is called the Green Asha, which has successfully now crossed the Strait of Hormuz near Iran. And Iran, which had closed the strait following the outbreak of the conflict over a month ago, which is this route that handles about 20% of the global petroleum trade, making it vital for energy supplies despite the risk. However, Indian vessels have maintained strong activity. Earlier shipments that included LPG carriers as well, which had made their way safely to India, while there were oil tankers as well that transported crude and gasoline from the UAE and Oman, also made their way safely to Indian ports. And another tanker, Green Sanvi, recently also completed its voyage with around 46,000 metric tons of cargo that it is now getting to the Indian shores. Let's in the meantime talk about how Indian diplomacy at multiple levels seems to be yielding positive results as far as India's energy requirements or needs are concerned, relatively in a stable position that we are finding itself in. So let's take you back in time. One of the first vessels to get a clearance to cross the Strait of Hormuz was Shivalik, the status which has arrived, carrying nearly 40,000 metric tons of LPG. Then we are looking at Nanda Devi, following Shivalik. Nanda Devi carrying over 46,000 metric tons of LPG, that also docked in Gujarat. Then came Jaglarki. Jaglarki was carrying over 80,000 metric tons of crude oil. It has also arrived. Then there was Jag Vasant and Pine Gas together carrying over 90,000 metric tons of LPG. It also docked. And now we are looking at BW Elm and also BWTYR, 94,000 tons of LPG. Well, also it has now safely arrived. Now what we are waiting for? We are waiting for the arrival of Green Sanvi, carrying over 46,000 metric tons of LPG, and also Green Asha to be the latest Indian flag tanker that seems to have been given the clearance of crossing the Strait of Hormuz, which it has already crossed. So that seems to be what we are now looking at as far as when it comes to high-level diplomatic outreach. However, amid the tensions that seems to be rising in West Asia. Now, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has spoken to External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar to discuss the present situation. And shortly after this fresh, this threat or an ultimatum that was issued by President of the United States of America. So there have been continuous talks as far as apprising of the current situation. The two leaders have also had a conversation. Let's connect with Rishabh on this. So External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar speaking with the Iranian Foreign Minister, his counterpart. What are we looking at, the two leaders delving on the current situation?
Well, Amita, again, going back in time, just last week we had a tweet coming in from the Iranian Foreign Minister where he mentioned about 5 countries, including India. The term friendly was used for these countries, and it was made very clear that the vessels from these 5 countries, which include India, would pass through Strait of Hormuz without any difficulty. And there have been at least 8 Indian flagged ships that have navigated safely through the Strait of Hormuz, and once they are in international waters, Indian Navy is also under Operation Urja Suraksha, is navigating them to Indian coast as well. Many of them have reached New Mangalore, Mumbai, in Gujarat as well, and few on the eastern side of Indian coastal area as well. So one thing is very clear. While India might not be seen making those tall claims that we will stop the war, we'll mediate, or we'll get the peace in West Asia, India is ensuring that its national interest is not compromised, and there's not a word crisis when it comes to the energy supplies in India. External Affairs Minister at least have spoken to his Iranian counterpart about half a dozen times, if not more, in last 38 days, and last being last night itself. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also spoken to the President Pezeshkian of Iran and have discussed the situation in West Asia. So we do still have our diaspora in Iran. There are a lot of students who are still in Iran. Yes. Many of them have been given given
Iran,
passage.
we're looking at a sizable, Indian population as well that resides in the Gulf, and Prime Minister Modi had also raised concerns for their well-being. Thank you very much, Risha, for joining us here on the broadcast. Let's talk about exactly what, Tehran has been weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz and what it has been now, doing according to reports, because there seems to be a toll booth system in place. Legally, it has also been passed as far as in the Iranian parliament is now concerned. Will it now extract money for the ships to actually get a clearance when it comes to passing the Strait of Hormuz? Because it is now expected when it comes to the tankers that are now concerned that they need to submit full documentation. There is now a mandatory toll payment that needs to be submitted. And of course, when it comes to obtaining clearance, courts also accepted on part of the IRGC that may give you that escorted passage. Now, also when it comes to the transit identification before entry, well, that will also seems to be the main point of importance, especially when it comes to the say the Indian flagships that we are now looking at, that would need that kind of clearance. However, what India is going to do about that, it seems that the matter is being taken up by the Iranian counterpart as well in this latest round of conversations that has happened between the two leaders. We head into a very short break, lots more lined up on the other side.